welcome to another episode of the Golden Hour. I'm Sharif Yunus here with Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, thanks for joining us again.
Hey, Sharif, thanks for having me back.
Of course. Well, Kevin, back in my weightlifting days, people would often be completely focused on what they were doing in the gym, like lifting the weights. And kind of secret among the elite was that actually muscle is built in the kitchen by what you eat. So I
hmm
had a thought that maybe there's a similar thing going on with work. So I'd love to hear from you about what is the best diet for optimal work.
Great question, Sharif. I know that we get asked this question in different ways by different users. I think everyone was looking for some kind of special superfood that will give them the ability to focus and or somehow help make it easier to work. I think that there is just not any conclusive data about foods impacting attention. Now, I think, with except to say that a really sugary diet seems bad for attention. But as long as you're not going overboard with carbs, uh, what you eat, it doesn't seem to have as big a difference eh, compared to when you eat. And I think that the best diet, you could say, is not a diet at all. It's simply fasting. So, what's called intermittent fasting is probably the best way to boost your cognitive abilities and your the ability to focus and engage work. So I think that in fact, it's fasting that makes people more intelligent, more capable of engaging work, and all gets them toned and ready for challenge.
So what you're saying is that while muscles are built in the kitchen, focus is developed by avoiding the kitchen. Uh,
I think
so,
that certainly people get distracted by food, don't they?
uh-huh.
And so people will be snacking, or they'll always feel like they want to be eating. And our brains are built to work best when we're not eating. So in some ways, the what working, and is a lot like hunting for prey and doing things you could talk about any mammal would do. So at least the carnivores. So working and fasting go together, even for herbivores. When it's like they're working for food in a sense. They're having to travel places for it. They're working to get it. Uh, but especially when you think of carnivores. So when you think of like a cheetah, if a cheetahs, if they're going to really, if they're going to catch their prey when they're hungry, fasting has to bring out the best in them. Like if fasting made the cheetah slow and sluggish, that would be a problem. But in fact, food tends to make animals slower and sluggish as their brain is diverting, or their body as a whole is diverting blood flow to the organs of digestion rather than the brain. So you only have a limited amount of blood and energy and where it can be directed. And in when we're fasting, in fact, more of it does go to the brain. And so there are all these cognitive benefits you get while you're actually fasting that you wouldn't get immediately after a meal. So I think people all know that they can be very sluggish after a meal, uh, but you in fact are faster and sharper when you're fasting, just like that cheetah or any other animal. Even squirrels. A squirrel that's hungry will remember where it buried the nuts better. And there is actually research that when animals are hungry, their episodic memory is enhanced. And this seems true for humans as well. So your ability to remember things and working memory are improved actually when you're in the fasting state. It just makes us better at doing things.
That's fascinating. So I don't know. I think we can get into some of the benefits of fasting, go a little bit deeper into those, but also just s- was thinking of why is it the case? I guess that humans, now that we grow our food or just have easier access to food, we develop the ability to now just have kind of a system of 3 meals a day. Does everyone do that? Do all cultures do 3 meals a day?
Well, I'm no expert on that. I think that we can say historically, by no means was 3 meals a day the norm. And so I'm not sure in today's world what exactly is done. And I think the idea of breakfast being the most important meal of the day, which seems to be about 100 years old as an idea, and it's hard to tell exactly where it came from,
Mhm. I think it was
but
the
it has
cereal
not.
companies, right?
Yeah, people say it's the orange juice companies trying to
Oh, the
get people
oranges.
to. Yeah, exactly, trying to the orange growers tried to get oranges sold, and I don't really know
Wow.
what the actual story is there, but it does seem that that has not held up. So that there have been. I remember the British Medical Journal had some meta-analysis looking at, is there any particular magic to breakfast? And the answer is actually no. So it doesn't seem like having or not having it. But at any rate, I think there we know that like the Roman soldiers would only eat at night. So basically they had a 4-hour window, where they would eat, and they never ate in the daytime at all, and that just made them very mobile. So there's any movement going on or typically fighting, that would, I would presume, would be done more in the daytime. Whatever the reason, they just so we know that the soldier diet was, and so sometimes people call, if you are only eating in a 4-hour window, something like the soldier diet or the Roman diet. Um, Thomas Aquinas, I remember reading something in his life. He would eat only one meal a day, and so there are definitely, I know of cases just that where I happen to see that people ate like that, but that's not something I'm an expert on.
Maybe now we could get into a little bit of a kind of understanding of what all the benefits are. Now you mentioned a few. How exactly do those benefits come about? You gave kind of some of the maybe evolutionary reasons why that it's if you're uh, hungry that you're going to need food. So it would seem reasonable that you would want to perform at a higher level during the times when you're hungry. But how does that actually work in the body?
Yeah, so I think that the important thing is, um, what is to one to help people overcome ideas they might have where they see hunger itself as a threat, particularly a threat to focus. And people can have the idea that they simply cannot work when they're hungry, or that they're going to be like somehow doomed to work in a worse way. So what I like to think about with hunger is, it is the perfect thing to practice reframing. So when you talk about, I love physical ways you could say of reframing. So we talk about how anxiety is really just adrenaline with a negative spin on it. And when you welcome the adrenaline, by reframing it, then it changes function, which is very true. And in fact, it goes from being something that you experience in your heart and hands and, trembling and sweating, into something you experience as just enhanced focus and enthusiasm for the task at hand. So, and enhanced ability to perform. Okay, so that's adrenaline. Even cravings. I love reframing cravings. Not, this is not food cravings, but for other things, as a reward circuit on the verge of being degraded, and that's when you get the craving, is when it needs reinforcement. Well, it's the exact same when it comes to hunger. What hunger really is, you can say, is our experience of a hormone called ghrelin. It can also be pronounced ghrelin, but I'll call it. So ghrelin is what people are having higher levels of when they're hungry. And they experience along with that, whether ghrelin is hunger or they just go together, it's not exactly clear, but they experience, essentially, you could say, ghrelin as hunger. Ghrelin is a hormone that allows your body to thrive on the challenge of fasting. Okay, so what you experience as hunger is actually how your body thrives. You're experiencing a stress hormone. But that stress hormone, it does a number of remarkable things. Number one, it enhances cognition. So enhancing of all these different forms of spatial and working memory are improved by ghrelin. So if you can Google ghrelin and cognitive benefits, and you can see Ghrelin is a funny spelling. The other thing is that ghrelin stimulates growth hormone to be increased. So you get a substantial increase in growth hormone in your body, which helps then in all of these different metabolic processes. And it even helps people who are trying to increase their muscle mass to increase lean muscle mass. So I would say, even for people who are weightlifting, that you can do weightlifting while fasting because you have the enhanced growth hormone. Um, Another, so one thing is flipping your experience of hunger to say, this is just how my body, in fact, responds. It doesn't have to be um, just like a negative detractor. In fact, you think better when your ground levels are higher, just like you can think much better when your adrenaline levels are higher. And fasting increases this internal adrenaline as well. I think when your body's first getting used to it, people can experience that as being more emotional or irritable, but very quickly you would develop the ability that that enhancement is just at the neural level of being able to think better. So we can talk about that, what are potential pitfalls of fasting, and so there is an onboarding process that you go through to where you're able to do it. But just to say, once you get through that, you really just get enhanced, like the effect of adrenaline inside your cortex to help you to think faster and better. And so ghrelin does that, and adrenaline does that, and they're both increased by fasting. Another huge benefit uh, is the well, I should say those are the prime cognitive benefits. You also have an increase in dopamine and a number of other neurotransmitters that help you, and you have an increase in GABA transmission in the brain. So that has to do with another chemical called ketones. Ketones are what you get when you break down fat. And the onboarding experience with intermittent fasting is all about upregulating your body's ability to quickly get energy from fat. So, and once what you're really doing is the body gets faster at liberating, you could say, ketones. Now, ketones can be burned by almost every cell in your body as an alternate to glucose. So, your body can run on ketones or it can run on glucose. And there are just a few exceptions to that. And some organs, like the heart and the brain, seem to prefer ketones. Oh, they always need a little bit of carbohydrate based. But the beautiful thing is when you break down triglyceride, which is what you store in the yellow fat, you get the perfect proportion of ketones with a little bit of carbs, the glucose based stuff, is perfect for the brain to run on. When you supply the brain with primarily then ketones, you get a change in all the neurotransmitters in the brain that allow for a more calm focus. So it's you get enhanced GABA transmission and decreased glutamate transmission. But that people experience that, in fact, as a reduction in threat mode. You just feel calmer and more at peace, and you're more able then to engage unitasking. So you'll get ghrelin, you'll get adrenaline, you look at ketones. There are all these incredible enhancements. And I'm just talking about cognitive benefits. There are, of course, metabolic benefits that your body overcomes insulin insensitivity. So you become sensitive again to insulin. People, if they need to lose weight, they can lose weight. I see losing weight as an unintended consequence of intermittent fasting. For me, the whole idea of it is it's performance enhancing. And then secondarily, if people's bodies need less weight, they get less weight.
Well, I hope at this point people are all sold on the idea, given that long list of benefits you mentioned. So maybe now it's good to get into how to actually do it. There are probably many different methods that you can find from Googling it online. So, what's the kind of method that you prefer, Kevin?
I can tell you what I what I did is, after reading the book, uh, The Complete Guide to Fasting by Dr. Fung, that and The Obesity Code, his two books, are must reads for people who want to like learn more about this stuff. And after I read the book, I was so convinced about it that I just switched to doing one meal a day. And later I learned that that's considered extreme. So, but first I didn't really have any problems with it. And so I just went Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday, having one meal a day, just having dinner. And so I'd have a little bit of a snack before bedtime. And then so I'd eat in essentially a 3 or 4 hour window. So that's like
So
a
that's the
20,
Roman diet.
that's the Roman diet. Exactly.
Okay.
And I found that it wasn't hard at all to make that transition. There were a few days where I just had to make more of an effort to stay hydrated. And I found this thing called Ultima Replenisher, which is perfectly compatible with fasting, but it's just electrolytes. And I found that it made me feel great in the afternoon if I had some of that. And I would have like coffee or green tea with nothing, no milk added or sugar, of course. And so you can have coffee, you can have tea. All you do is you don't have breakfast or lunch, and then you eat at dinner. But since then, I've learned that for most people, the more gradual approach is you start by delaying breakfast. And then, so if you, let's say you finish eating at 7 p.m. The night before, then you would try to not have breakfast until something like, you might start with 9 a.m. That'd be a 14-hour window of no eating. And then you get to 11 a.m., a 16-hour window of no eating. And then you keep extending it. But most people who do that kind of time limited do it on a daily basis. That just becomes your new pattern of eating. And then eventually you just don't have breakfast, you just have lunch. And eventually you don't have lunch, you just have the dinner. So that's like, there is a gradual way of doing it. Now, I personally find that hard just to go to the 20-hour fast or 21-hour fast. But if people do find it hard, usually what happens is they feel an upset stomach. So they feel a little nauseous. If you feel nauseous, you should probably just eat. So you don't have to, or you eat and and then keep really well hydrated, especially in the beginning. That seems to be the case. Um, I think with time though, and it's after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, your body then is really used to mobilizing energy from fat, and that's when you feel the big increase in stamina. And then you feel more awake at the end of the afternoon. If I were to do some kind of meditation after work, I found that with fasting, it was hugely helped. But probably it did take a couple weeks at least before I noticed that real benefit there, but just much less sleepy in that afternoon.
I think that gives a kind of clear roadmap. It's also good that you pointed out the I guess because you normally have water with meals or fluids with meals, that if you're not having the meals, then you need to replenish those throughout the day. Are there any other kind of I don't know, safety points or just points that you would give people of kind of tips to keep everything working during that time or during that transition, or are there people who shouldn't think about fasting?
Yeah, I would say if people have any serious medical problems, they should discuss with their doctor before doing any kind of change. So if they're going to start fasting, especially if people, and this is the people who have to be super careful, if you have diabetes and you're on something that lowers your blood sugar, like insulin or the other medicines that are used to treat type 2, especially diabetes, um, then you have to be very careful, because in general, people who fast do not have problematic low blood sugar. So, and Dr. Fung says that the only people who do have problems with low blood sugar when fasting are people taking drugs meant to lower blood sugar levels. But the how people time those drugs and the dosage was based on a different pattern of eating. You can't just translate that. You can't just do the same, insulin pattern or other drugs. So if you're taking anything that lowers blood sugar, you have to talk with the doctor before contemplating this. That said, intermittent fasting is probably the best treatment for diabetes, and the things that those doctors are working on. So I would hope that their doctor is already talking to them. The It's been kind of slow for intermittent fasting to get fully accepted, but it was, I think, 3 years ago that the Harvard Health Letter, which had been opposed to fasting before that, flipped completely and became and said, now we have to admit there's so much evidence, that this is not a dangerous practice. And then in 2019, the New England Journal of Medicine came out with a review article of all the studies on intermittent fasting, and it was glowing praise. So I think that the days when intermittent fasting was seen as a dangerous fringe exercise, I think those are totally gone. But if you have health concerns or any concerns at all about doing it, first just talk to the doctor and make sure there's no problem. People who are women who are pregnant and nursing shouldn't fast. So that seems to be a consistent recommendation so far. I don't know what you do if you have gestational diabetes and how that you should don't listen to what I'm saying here about how to manage your health if you're pregnant and have gestational diabetes. Just talk to the doctor. Um, kids under the age of 18, maybe even we could say 25 or something, but younger people uh, probably shouldn't fast. So maybe in your 20s you can start doing it. What you don't want to see, especially if you're young and healthy, is a drop in weight. So you don't. I think again, weight loss from fasting is a side effect that has to be managed. You don't want too much of it. I have not. I've fasted now, about 5 days a week for a couple of years, and I haven't lost any weight from it. And in the studies, that's actually seen as the best. But also, my body didn't really need to lose weight, and so that's kind of what you want is your body gets really good at maintaining a certain ideal weight for itself. And so if you're off of that a lot, fasting does gently bring it down, but you don't want it to be a steep decline. So be careful of doing it for weight loss. It's better just seen as performance enhancing. Young people shouldn't do it. And then anyone with serious medical conditions or taking diabetes medicines has to talk to a doctor. Oh, eating disorders. If people have a restrictive eating disorder, they should be talking with, if they're working with a psychiatrist or therapist or primary care doctor. Um, I think that fasting is different than what happens with anorexia because fasting is done deliberately for the sake of a benefit versus something that is done compulsively, without a sense of freedom. When people fast, they actually feel liberated and free. So, and it's a great experience. That's why it helps to meditate. But eating disorders, if there's a history of that, then I think you have to talk to a therapist first.
Great. Well, Kevin, I think that's all our time for today. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Only that the how I think this relates to what we talked about in optimal work is reframing the experience of hunger to see that in fact it can be a great help cognitively, and also getting used to this idea of learning curves, that fasting and your ability to do it well is a kind of virtuous cycle. So it builds up over time. So you can start gently, and not everyone has to do it. I don't think it should be recommended for all. It's an available help, but it gets easier and easier over time. And then gradually people find that it gets also more helpful over time as time goes on. And then there are lots of other health benefits. Essentially, fasting has all the benefits of exercise in one way or another. And they work super well together. Um, so to say that, and you can exercise on when you're fasting. That's a perfectly good thing to do. It increases your exercise tolerance. Just to say then, it's just another aid. It's another help. It involves a lot of reframing. It involves a lot of deliberation, overcoming impulses to eat, and it involves a great sense of embracing challenge. So in that sense, I think it relates super well to what we talk about in optimal work.
Those are really interesting connections. All right. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank
We
you,
will
Sharif.
be back next week.